Okay guys, we're like halfway into the brewing process. So we basically have the broth cooking right now. We added the hops and it actually smells like going past the Molson Brewery in Toronto, you know, so it's kind of cute, you know. So we should actually record the smell here. Okay, now we're going to pour this stuff. That's the first batch. Okay, number 2, here we go. Ooh. Okay, so now you need to stir it for some time, so everything mix it up properly. And then we're going to take the temperature, and then we'll see when we actually add the yeast to start the fermentation. Okay, now comes the final step. We're going to add the yeast. So now I have about 15 grams of Cooper's yeast over here. This should be enough to ferment about 4.5 gallons. So I'm just going to add this over here. So we measured the beer temperature as about room temperature. And if it actually gets too hot, then the yeast would die and basically the fermentation wouldn't start. So it's absolutely critical that this stuff reaches room temperature before you start adding the yeast. So let's just go for it. So I'll just sprinkle a little bit and then stir it until it dissolves in there. And let's add a little bit more. So the yeast that we're using here over here is Cooper's, and I've been told like the Cooper's yeast is kind of very nice for beer brewing, because this one actually acts upon a very long temperature range. So usually with cheap beer yeast, so basically if you start using a lager beer yeast, then you might actually get like some complex alcohols at the high fermentation, and this will basically create a heavy headache once you drink your beer, if you basically ferment your beer at very high temperatures, so basically way above let's say the regular fermentation temperature. Okay, now we're going to measure the gravity of the beer. Essentially that measure allows us to establish the alcohol content later on. So basically the way you do it, you just immerse this body into the stuff until it's fully immersed. And then in order to make sure that there are no air pockets to it, you basically spin it for some time, like this. And basically take a look at what the gravity looks like. So currently we have a gravity of 1.4. So now we're going to close this body, and then in 1 week we're going to see whether we screwed up or whether this stuff actually works. So what we have over here is the container lid. Just going to press it on tightly. And the other thing that we already put on there is an airlock. And basically as the yeast starts to ferment this stuff, basically all the carbon dioxide will go out over here and then evacuate over here, and that's why basically all the air gets pushed out to the top. Okay, so let's just wait and see. So we'll take about like 1.5 weeks